Let's talk buck knives. The Buck Bantam 286. Check it out. So welcome everybody to another video. So let's see what Buck has to say about their knives on their website. So first and foremost, it is a mid lockback design. They call it durable, lightweight, and compact. It's generally durable, definitely lightweight, and it's pretty compact, I would say. They say it's the perfect knife for a variety of tasks. I would say it's a good knife for a variety of tasks. Doesn't really excel in any specific thing, but it's definitely a good knife for a variety of tasks. I would agree with that. It's got a textured handle, offers a firm grip and a well-balanced grip. Definitely a good grip. Really a lot of real estate on the handle, so I would say yes, it's got a really good grip. They say the lockback requires 2 hands of operation. I would definitely agree with that because it's definitely the deployment and the detent on this knife has definitely been the major problem I have with this knife in terms of deployment. Is not that smooth, so it's definitely needed a 2-hand operation to operate this knife. We all know how legendary Paul Bos heat treatment is, and they're calling themselves as a market leader in edge retention thanks to our steel selections and heat treat process pioneered by industry famous Paul Bos. I don't have to read the whole thing. You know Paul Bos makes some of the best heat treatments in the world. I have never had a problem with their blades. I love their steel, love the contours of their steel, and never had any chips or rolls or anything like that. Their steels are pretty much uncompromised. They're really some of the best in the industry, so there's definitely no argument there in terms of the Buck steel. Now, if I had to talk about aesthetics alone, I do like the look of this knife, that orange cameo, that beautiful false swedge, that false swedge on top of the tip, the stonewash finish. It's got a 3.58-inch blade length with the 420 HC steel. And don't forget, the 420 is a really good steel because it kind of delivers the resistance of like the hard carbon steel, but it still gives you a really good corrosion resistance like the chromium stainless steel. So they do a really great job on that Bos treated steel and that 420 steel that they choose to put on all their Buck knives. The handle is a glass reinforced textured nylon is what they call it, but basically it's a plastic handle, textured plastic handle. It's very light in hand, and the blade thickness 0.120 inches, and the inner grip is really good. It's very comfortable in a grip at a 4.5 inch inner grip. Edge of a legend. Buck knives are made in the United States. Of course, they, just to be known, they do use imported parts, but it is pretty much the best well-known American knife company. Buck knives, made in the U.S. And you know what? They priced them really good. This knife being somewhere under 40 bucks at the time of the airing of this video, it is a very cost-effective, well-made American knife. Not the best-made American knife, but a very well-made American knife and very competitively priced on a budget. It's a really good, all-around good knife. This particular knife. There are some Buck knives that are constructed better than this, but we're talking about the Bantam right now, 286. The handle, the grip of the handle is my favorite thing about the knife. I do love that beautiful stonewash finish. Again, that swedge on the top, the thickness of the blade. It's just a very handsome looking knife, and it's again very, very comfortable in the hand. A little unbalanced though, and you'll see with the throwing test. You know, when I do some testing with it, it's a little unbalanced in terms of it falling into place because the nylon handle, the handle is so light compared to the blade that it doesn't have the balance that I've seen with this test with other knives. Now, when you compensate that with a little force, it definitely took some nice bites into the wood. Now, why do I do these tests? Just to show you basically what you should or shouldn't do with certain pocket knives. This is definitely not a throwing knife. It's not a knife that's going to handle throwing it. You can see basically how it's vibrating and all that. And it's just, you know, it's too light of a handle. It's just, it's a plastic handle. It's not G10. You can see the balance is not there. It's definitely a lot more weight towards the front of the blade, and it's not balanced to the handle because, again, it's just a textured plastic handle. But again, they're trying to keep also the price low, so they have to compensate somewhere. But you can see all the vibrating it does when it hits the wood. So I would not recommend, you know, throwing the knife into a log or a stump or anything like that. That's simply just not what it's built for. But, you know, with a little force, the hard downward throws, it handled okay. The lock didn't fail at any point. But as I pushed it a little further, when you see later on in the test, you're going to see that there is some effect in this knife in trying to push this thing a little much more than what it's made or designed to do. And I would be doing an injustice to this review if I didn't mention the edge that this knife came in. This is probably by far one of the greatest edges I've gotten in a pocket knife, and it's been pretty much true with a lot of buck knives that I've had my hands on. Now, to confess, I did hone up the edge a little bit, but the edge was already there. I really just passed it on some really fine belts to make it screaming sharp. You can see how beautifully it's slicing up the paper with absolutely no effort whatsoever. It's a very, very impressively sharp edge on this buck knife. And again, just probably the best cutting performance I've seen, some of the best cutting performance I've seen out of a knife, out of a box, with just some simple honing. And just goes to show you how easy it is to bring buck knife edges to a screaming sharp edge. One of the biggest perks of this knife is the handle with a 4.5-inch inner grip. This will definitely accommodate for large hands, extra large hands. You see you have the extra thumb stop there, thumb grip there from the reverse grip, and you can rest your thumb right on top. You know, multiple different grips on this thing. No finger choy or anything like that, but you don't need it. It really fills up your hand really well. I always appreciate getting a knife with a really good blade and a really good, comfortable handle to boot, to make it to pretty much complete the knife for what it's intended to do. A tool for something you can carry, something you could be comfortable using when you're cutting or when you're using it, or all that stuff. It's just a very well-made knife in terms of the dimensions of it. Now, my biggest gripe of this knife is the deployment. It's a very stiff deployment. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you know, buck knives are wear in. I mean, I haven't used this a ton, but it's not wearing in. All the buck knives I've had in my hand so far, they don't have a very fluid or smooth deployment or detent. You really need a two-hand operation with this thing. Now, is that something that you should avoid this knife for this? Not really. I mean, for the most part, I'd rather have it, you know, a firm grip, a firm, tight, you know, deployment than just something that's too loose, that's unpredictable. Basically, what happens is once it locks into place, it's good to go. If you want something a lot more fluid, look elsewhere. But for a good solid knife that doesn't have a very fluid deployment, which may or may not break in depending on how much you use it. Again, I haven't used this a ton. If you guys use your buck knives a lot more than I do and you think they break in, let me know in the comments. But that's the biggest problem I've seen with these knives so far. Now here's a water hose test. Now the purpose of this test is to see how good of a slicer this knife is and how well, with putting a lot of pressure on the locking system, how well the locking system holds up. This is definitely a great slicing knife, guys. I mean, it got through the water hose probably really fast compared to a lot of knives I tested with this. Really, absolutely no problem whatsoever. This is a great processing game knife, camping knife, something that you would have at your hip to basically to process game or meat or anything like that. And I actually cut up a couple of pieces of the hose there so I can simulate like a stabbing motion and to see how good of a stabber it is and how the tip holds up, not having any steel belted tires to use like Scab does, so I had to kind of improvise somewhere. See here at this point, I put about 4 pieces of water hose together, kind of place it down, push it down nice and tight, and just to see how many pieces it can kind of go through cleanly. And it went through pretty much all 4 pieces pretty clean. You see the point sticking out there. The point stayed fine. There was no bending or rolling of the point or anything like that, so that handled pretty well. I'm pretty confident with the 420 steel that Buck gives you. I mean, if there's anything, the steel is pretty much what you're paying for, and everything else is kind of comes out of budget on certain Buck knives, like this one with the nylon sheet. But there's no doubt about it, you know, in terms of the blade that you're getting with it. I tried to cut a couple different things with this knife. You see I cut some electric cordage there with the copper inlay wires, and it cut through really cleanly. Listen, it's a great cutting and slicing knife. And also the grip. You know, the grip, you pretty much have a sure grip in your hand. regardless of what you're cutting, whether it be water hose or whatever it is. So if you're putting a lot of stress on the handle, it stays comfortable in the hand and it fills up your hand pretty well. And the knife really knifes. I mean, it slices, it dices. It's a very, very good, strong cutter, and the edge retention stays pretty well throughout the entire cutting session. It's an attractive knife to carry, and it's also a really good EDC. It's basically just a good cutter. It's a great cutter. I mean, if you want to process boxes with it, you want to carry it around as an EDC, and you have something in your pocket to process cardboard, it's a great slicer. You can see how basically it's going through this cardboard with absolutely no problem. And this is, I think actually I cut this cardboard after I was cutting some wood with it, and still kept the edge retention pretty well. It's still paper slicing sharp, and it's along with it being I think a good camping knife and a good hunting knife, it's definitely a very good EDC for processing, you know, whatever you need to process every day on a day-to-day basis. You're camping with this knife. Can it process wood? Can it make, can you cut up some wood to make some spear points for maybe some camping, or put some posts down for some, for your tent and things like that? It can definitely process wood. And at all times, again, I'm doing this test to show you how good of a slicer it is when you're coupling it up with, you know, processing some wood for a fire or making up camp. And again, trying to see also if there's any fatigue or any stress holding it, or if there's any slippage or any hot spots. Yes, I know I'm wearing gloves, but I've held this knife many times, and there are definitely no hot spots. But it processes wood very cleanly. You can see towards the end of this, it's going to come to a very fine point, and it handled it pretty well. Now, it's going to be a knife that you can basically slice with and process wood with it. It's definitely not a banger. Okay, you'll see now I'm going to be batoning with the knife, and it didn't end that well, you know, after using it, you know, hard use, trying to baton with this knife. But this definitely brought this thing to a really nice point. Now, I never normally condone or recommend batoning with a folder. Now, obviously, there are some knives out there like Cold Steel that pretty much are built like tanks. You can see how it actually already failed because I hit it in the wrong spot there, but it kind of went into place. Why do I do this test then if I don't think it could handle it? Just to show you how much you can get away with certain knives. I mean, that's why we do these reviews, to show you how well the knife works in different scenarios. Did it get through the batoning? Absolutely, because it's got a great edge, really good sharp edge. If you kind of hit it in the right way, it will baton for you. If you don't have any other resorts and you don't have a fixed blade with you, and you need to kind of baton with this wood and cut up some thin pieces of wood to make some small logs, small sticks for a fire, it can definitely handle it. Would I recommend it? No. But it can definitely handle it if you need to handle it. It's not going to fall apart on you. If you're doing it with care, you can definitely baton with this knife. Should you baton with this knife? That's not recommended, because again, I don't think it's going to hold up. So my objective was achieved in terms of making some sticks for a fire, but how well did the knife hold up? Now, there was definitely some more play than I had when I first took it out of the box. Pretty much, you know, a lot of play, I would say, you know, compared to how it was when it was brand new. So that would tell me that basically for whatever hard use test I just did in terms of batoning with it, I wouldn't recommend it for this knife. As an emergency, it'll work. It's still opening and closing. It's still stiff. It didn't wear in still, but it's definitely some play in the blade. Is it going to be played to the point where it's unusable? No, but it's definitely some play you would want to have there, and it probably wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have pushed the knife too hard doing the batoning and just stuck with what it was made for in terms of slicing, processing game, and things like that. And again, use the knife for what it was designed and what the purpose of the design was for this knife, and how it's priced and how it's sold. So yes, I would not recommend any hard use on this knife. So coming to the end of this video, guys, would I recommend this knife? I would say yes, as long as you know what it's made for. It's a cutter, it's a slicer, it's a good camping knife, it's a good EDC, and it's a very handsome looking knife. I really like that orange cameo, but again, understand, you're getting nylon, plasticky type of handles. It's very light, it's not incredibly balanced, it's not a knife you're going to be throwing with it or using it for hard use or banging it around or anything like that. But as a good cutting, hunting knife, camping knife, EDC, yes, absolutely, I would recommend it. And it's buck quality. It's a buck quality blade, really handsome looking blade. I love the edge, the swedge. There's so much to like about this knife, as long as you know what the application, what it was built for. So I would say most knives are for most people, as long as they know what they're for. And that's why we do these reviews, so you know exactly what you're purchasing. And coming in at under 40 bucks, I think it's definitely a great buy and a great quality, American-made knife from Buck that would definitely add to your collection and be a really, really good knife for you to carry every day. So, guys, thanks to all I have for you. Thanks for sticking around to another video. Until the next sword and knife video, guys, this is Joe from JS Bladecraft. I'll see you when I see you. Love and respect to each and every one of you. Ciao.